Hi, my name is Meredith Little, and I'm doing my final project on emotions. From doing all the self-assessments, I realized there's a common theme of emotions because they play a large role in how we communicate, interact, and take care of ourselves.
The first activity that incorporated the themes of emotion was empathy. Empathy is part of emotions and dealing with the emotions of others. I feel that I need to start being more aware of how other people's emotions make me feel and how I probably should be a little more empathetic to others.
In this assessment, my empathy quotient was 51. In comparison, the average quotient for females was 45. In conclusion, I have an above average empathy quotient. I was a little surprised by this because usually I only feel strong empathy for those I'm close with. I think that my score was increased because I'm good at sensing when people are upset or when something is wrong. My asset from this assessment would be that I have the power to achieve better empathy, since I now know more detailed requirements of being empathetic. As well, I am able to better understand my friends. Empathy relates to the theme of emotion because it is about letting someone be emotional to you, as well as understanding those emotions of the other person. I had no idea that empathy was not only about perspective taking, but also about open mindedness and imagination. I don't have a very good imagination, which led me to understand why I'm not very empathetic. I think that I am empathetic, I just don't know the right words to say in sensitive situations. In the future, I can personally be much more empathetic. I really love when people are empathetic towards me, so I feel that I now need to give them that back in a similar way. For example, if my future spouse is feeling underappreciated at work, I can verbally empathize, such as saying, "It's no fun to feel underappreciated. I understand how you feel." As well, it's important for me to support and paraphrase, but combine those into an empathizing response. For example, I could say, "Ugh, I'm sorry. I bet it hurt and is frustrating when you're doing all this great work and your boss doesn't see it."
Professionally, I can remember that there is ethics involved in empathizing in people. As well, it's important to be able to be empathetic to your diverse group of coworkers, even if you don't know some of them that well.
Emotional intelligence was a very interesting assessment for me to do because I'm very emotional. I usually am a very irrational thinker and don't manage my emotions very well at all. From this assessment, I scored in the average range for both interpersonal and intrapersonal dimensions of emotional intelligence. However, for adaptability dimension, I was way below average. My score wasn't even in the range listed. This means I can't really adapt to my emotions, and am almost set in my ways with them. Lastly, I was in the lower part of the range for stress management. I don't have the best stress management skills, so I was not surprised by this. One asset of mine that I have learned through this assessment is that I have a lot of emotions and I need to be proud that I have feelings, but it's important that I don't let them be debilitative. As well, I learned that self-fulfilling prophecies are real, and I have the power to control my future based on positive thinking. Looking back, I really loved this chapter because I have a lot of emotions, and I really just identified with it. It was very enlightening for me to be able to learn how to better handle my emotions, as well as describe my emotions. In the future, I hope that my debilitative thinking can diminish.
Personally, there are so many strategies from this chapter I could use to help better manage my emotions and minimize my debilitative emotions. One important way to do this is through a 4-step process. First, I will monitor my emotional reactions. To do this, I can recognize my ways of behavior, such as being unusually quiet and speaking very shortly to others. Next, I will note the activating event. Instead of suppressing the activating event, it's important that I notice it and deal with it. I need to start recognizing if it's a certain person or just a type of individual that is causing the feeling. Afterwards, I will analyze my thoughts and record my self-talk. I can write down my thoughts, and that will help me realize if I'm being irrational or not. Lastly, I will dispute my irrational beliefs. Professionally, I will need to behave myself in the workplace and maximize my facilitative emotions. In the workplace, I will need to be positive and be very grateful for everything in my life. Forgiveness is an important part of this emotional theme because forgiveness is an emotional response to an emotional event. Forgiveness isn't always easy.
I'm an extremely forgiving person, and I think that this is one of my best assets. I think it's important to forgive people because I don't want to spend my whole life holding grudges. As well, I believe in being very kind at heart. In this assessment, I was very high above the average for nonverbal display of forgiveness, conditional forgiveness and discussion of offense, and explicit direct forgiveness. I was in the average for benevolent forgiveness and for consequences of transgression. When I'm forgiving someone, I tell them that I forgive them very loud and clear. As well, I show a lot of nonverbal displays of forgiveness, such as hugging. I also realize that I am a big conditional forgiveness person. For example, I will say, I will only forgive you if you stop, dot, dot, dot. This seems to work and validate why I should be forgiving someone, even though I'm probably going to forgive them anyways. At the end of the day, I almost always forgive someone. I think sometimes I can be a little too overly forgiving.
Personally, I now have tips for how to maintain and support my relationships. This especially applies to me because I'm in a very important relationship right now. In the future, to make sure my relationship with my husband stays good, I can provide and execute relational maintenance. I can be positive by saying, "This event will be fun," or "We're going to have a good day." It's important that I keep our house upbeat and in a nice climate. Next, I should be open with him, and if I have a concern, I should address it. I should provide assurances by letting him know both verbally and non-verbally that I love him and that I appreciate him. It's important that I'm invested in his family and that we make an effort to spend time with his friends and family, not just mine. Lastly, instead of there being a list of chores for him to do, I could always help him do some too. I could take the dog for a walk or get his car washed if he was busy. Professionally, I can provide social support to my coworkers. Work can be stressful, so I can provide emotional support to those who are just as stressed as I am. I can also provide informational support. If I'm working in a new city, I could ask coworkers about good shopping places or advice where I should eat. Lastly, if someone was really slammed with tasks, I could help them out by doing one of them. This is instrumental support.
I didn't really like the confirming and disconfirming messages assessment as much as the other ones, just because I feel like these messages are a much harder topic. However, it relates to my emotions because my emotions are much better when I have confirming messages coming from my friends and loved ones. This assessment, I noticed about how I had so many confirming messages from my friends, but almost no disconfirming messages. I have greater confirmation according to the assessment, but low disconfirmation. One of my assets that I discovered is that I give a lot of confirming messages through acknowledgement. I acknowledge by listening and being of interest to what people have to say.
I'm very lucky to have friends who send me more confirming messages than disconfirming messages. We all recognize that we are trying to communicate and really value what we all have to say. My friends may interrupt me ever so often, but never give super impersonal responses or relevant responses.
Professionally, I think it's important that I learn to respond non-defensively to criticism. I'm sure I will be faced with criticism by a future boss. It is more professional to respond appropriately than get very publicly upset and defensive. The first step is to seek more information by asking for specifics, so they can explain their position in detail and so I can listen to why I'm being criticized. As well, I can paraphrase my boss's thoughts and feelings. The other tactic is to agree with my boss, who's the critic. No matter if it's hurtful, it honestly may be the truth, and sometimes it's important to come to terms with that.
I enjoyed this assessment because I loved learning about the ways I resolve conflicts. I had a pretty clear idea before of how I resolved conflicts, and I wanted to see if my results would match up to what I thought. Conflict resolution relates to emotions because it's important to respond to an emotional conflict in an appropriate way that can accomplish things and solve the conflict. As well, there can oftentimes be an emotional component in conflict resolution. My highest score out of competition, collaboration, compromise, avoidance, and accommodation was accommodation. I knew that this was my way to solve conflicts, so I wasn't very surprised to see that this was my highest. I think this can be an asset to me because I don't think I am letting my emotions ruin a relationship, and it shows that I am future-oriented if I know the long-term cost of winning would not be worth the short-term gain.
As I reflect on this assessment, it may not always be a good idea for me to just use accommodation. I have to resort to accommodation because I'd rather other people be happy over myself. I have learned, though, that it's important to use different conflict styles for different situations. Sometimes it's important to use avoidance when I just need to cool down and the situation isn't that important. I can use competition for when the other person isn't willing to compromise or I have to protect myself. I can use compromise for when we need a quick solution or when the issue is moderately important. Lastly, I can use collaboration, which may be the best because it's win-win, because it merges insights and uses creativity and creating relationships.
I personally learned how to conflict manage. To do this, I first need to define my needs. I specifically need to figure out what I want. Next, I need to share these needs. To share, I need to pick a time and a place. After I share my needs, I need to listen to the needs of the other person. Afterwards, we can generate possible solutions to satisfy both our needs. We then can evaluate and pick the best solution, then implement it, and then follow up on the solution to see if it worked. Professionally, I'll be working with people of different genders and cultures. Oftentimes, there are differences in how genders and cultures approach conflict. It ultimately would be important for me to take this into consideration when in conflict with someone in the workplace.